everybody, Jess here from the YouTube channel Scrappy Sisters, and I am doing another guest TT layout for you today. And in this layout, I am using a few different supplies. The first one being the gorgeous stencil that came in the kit. I didn't actually get the mixed media kit this round, so I am using my own supplies to assist with the stencil. So I've just got a little bit of texture paste there. And I am changing the colour of my white texture paste by adding a little bit of the Kaisercraft acrylic paint and a little bit of the blue acrylic paint that is from the Reject Shop. And I'm just mixing that together. The reason why I added blue was to just make the green a little bit more of a leaf green as opposed to a grass green. So once that is all mixed up, I'm going to use the stencil and this green paint to make leaves. So the stencil is actually called feathers or something to do with feathers, but I'm just going to be using a really small section of the stencil to make leaves. And you saw earlier that I really lightly drew a circle around my page, and I'm going to be making a bit like a wreath today. So I'm just stenciling a really small section to make a few leaf prints. I do realize after I've already started that the card that I'm using, which is just a loyalty card, is a little bit too big, and I really should have got a thinner palette knife to do this, as I am making quite a bit of a mess around my page, which is not my initial plan at all. I actually wanted this to be really nice and neat and clean. I know I am going to be adding more bits and pieces to my wreath, but I really didn't do a very good job. So I actually just got a cloth, a damp cloth, and wiped this up as quickly as I could before it had dried. And obviously they did still leave some green smudges. So if you knew you weren't doing any other embellishing, this really isn't neat enough. But I know that I'm not finished with my embellishing or even with my stencil yet. So I'm hoping that I can cover up a few of the green smudges with the next couple of layers that I am putting on. So once I have cleaned up the area, I pop that outside to dry. It's quite hot where I am at the moment, so this took no time at all. It's such a small amount to dry. And then I come back and do a little bit more leaves. And this time I'm just using the straight white texture paste. And I'm not too worried this time about any smudges because it is white. It's not as noticeable coming through onto the page, and it also is sort of helping to cover up some of the green smudges that I did earlier. So these are just trying to be leaves. So I am going to be using some of the beautiful flowers from the patterned paper, and I'm going to cut those out and place them in a circle in like a wreath around, following the circle line that I drew before. So these are just going to add a little bit of colour and a little bit of additional pop or texture to the layout. So once I have finished with the white flowers, I again pop that outside to dry, and think waste not, want not. I decide I want one more little colour there of leaves, and I decide I might as well just use that green texture paint up a little bit. So I add some black to turn it into the black colour, and I'm going to add my third and final set of leaves, and these are going to be black ones. So I wanted to use the black because the flowers I'm going to be using from the pattern paper are the black and white flowers from that pattern paper sheet, which you will see really shortly. But obviously if you got the kit, you know which ones I am talking about. So these will be the final leaves, and I'm doing quite small leaves in the back. I do use bigger ones as well, but I didn't want the black to stand out too much or to be too strong or too dark a colour. I really wanted the green and the white to be the main feature of the leaves. So as I mentioned earlier, I will be covering a lot of this paint up with the flowers, but there is going to be bits and pieces that sort of peek through between the flowers and also between the photo. I haven't shown you the photo yet. At this actual stage of my planning, I hadn't actually picked the photo that I was going to use. I am way behind in my scrapbooking, but I'm not behind in my printing. I try and keep my printing up to date every week, but I just don't get a chance to scrap as much as I would like. So I know all my photos are there ready, I just hadn't chosen which one exactly I'm going to use. So I popped that outside to dry, and while that is drying, I know I said outside, but it must be already dry to be back in the picture because I did pop it outside. I get busy fussy cutting this gorgeous pattern paper. So this is the flowers, or these are the flowers that I'm going to use to create my wreath effect, following the grey lead line that I drew around the circle. Now the reason why I chose to trace the bowl and make the circle actually visible with the grey lead line was because I've tried to do this before and I end up making it wonky, and I'm really not happy with the overall effect. So I just drew super lightly with the grey lead because I knew I wouldn't be able to rub it out, and you don't see it at all. I have it completely covered and you cannot see a grey lead line at all. So I've got busy. Oh, I'm so sorry about that sound. That is my son pushing his little stool around. So I have got busy fussy cutting. My tips for fussy cutting is I generally hold the scissors relatively still and move the piece of paper more than the scissors. And I like to cut right down the end of the scissors closest to my handle, not closest to the pointy part or the snipping end of the scissors. I find that that works better. If you are not someone who enjoys fussy cutting, I find that that is less painful on the fingers and the hands. So now I'm having a bit of a play as to where I'm going to place all of these flowers that I've cut out and how I'm going to get those around the wreath and still see a few of the leaves that I printed. Obviously I realized that I've done nowhere near enough, so I go back and do a little bit more fussy cutting, and I place these down as I go. So I'm going to jump in a second to seeing the wreath basically full, just with my last flower being cut out now. So there we have all of the flowers out, not most of them, all of them. And I'm just having a little bit of a fiddle with placement as to where to put them. I don't want the exact same cluster of flower next to each other. Some of them flower clusters are a little bit bigger and a little bit smaller, and I want to try and balance that out around the circle. I also want to make sure you can still see a few of the leaves that I painstakingly painted. And I also decided they needed a little pop of colour, so I picked out the 4 flowers that came in the cut apart sheets as well. So I then decided to dig out all of the stars. So I've got all of the stars that were in the cut apart sheet and am placing those higgledy-piggledy around the inside and the outside of the wreath. And I'm trying to not put the same colours too close together. I'm also trying to vary size, so some of the really tiny hearts and some of the bigger hearts, sort of similarly to how you might use an enamel dot is what I'm thinking with the placement of the stars. I'm not thinking too carefully about it. I am just chucking them on because this is where I'm getting my splashes of colour and sort of highlighting the circle aspect of the wreath and just drawing your eye to different places around the circle. Then I'm just thinking if I do this at this section of the camera, but I think I do. I then also get the, oh no, now I'm going to get my photo. That's what's going to happen next. So I grab my photo and it's time to back my photo so that it has a little bit behind it. So I have backed it off camera in a plain white and in the pattern paper. Which one was it? I can't even remember, but one of the other pattern papers that came in this kit. Now, I'm not sure if something in my kit was wrapped in this tissue paper or not, but it was sitting right beside me, so it was very, very handy and just looked like a great addition to soften up this layout. So I've just grabbed that tissue paper. I didn't get it out of my stash, so it obviously came very recently from something. Whether it was in this kit or not, I'm not 100% sure. But I just thought it was a really nice way to soften up the picture again, because the flowers is really nice and girly and I didn't want that photo being too harsh on the page. So I'm just making sure the tissue paper is not too large and covering up too much of what's happening in the picture. I did end up taking away one of the big flowers because there's no point in leaving it there because the photo was just going over the top anyway, and I can use that elsewhere. So I stuck all of the flowers down off screen because I did not move them from how I had them placed. And I just stuck them down using PVA glue. And the reason for doing that was because I didn't want to stick any of sort of the leafy part down. I wanted those to seem loose and seem like they were popping out of the page a little bit. So you might have noticed there, to hold the tissue paper in place as to where I wanted it to be, I used some masking tape and then I stuck it down onto the page using double-sided tape, and I am now putting foam dots behind my actual photo, so the photo will be popped up from the tissue paper. So the tissue paper is straight to the page and the foam dots is from the tissue paper. I also fussy cut out a few of the flowers that were cut off on the edge of the paper and used those to go around the photograph. So I didn't waste the ones that were sort of half off the page of the square piece of pattern paper because I only needed a small section of them anyway to help give the illusion that they were underneath the photo. So just popping on those flowers there with foam dots again just to add a little bit of dimension to the page, having some things stick out a little bit more than others. And I just love the way those colours soften in together and really support the flowiness of this layout. I then decided I really wanted to add the Corbett Creation stars, so I pull out every single star that came in the packet that I haven't already used and pop away all the hearts because I didn't want to. I could have done a mixture of both, but I didn't want to add hearts to this one because I used the paper stars. I wanted to keep with the stars. So I am just gluing those on with PVA glue, popping some glue on the page and then popping them down on top of the little dab of glue there. I'm just putting them randomly around the page again, sort of nearby to where I've put a cluster of the paper hearts, paper stars, and also some of them I'm sort of tucking in underneath some of the flowers or something like that. So I decided for this particular layout that the gorgeous stickers that came in the kit were a little bit too colourful for what I was going for. So I dug into last month's kit. I think it was last month's, maybe the months before, but definitely one of the Kitaholic kits, and pulled out those super cute word stickers that came in the kit. I didn't want it to be white though because I decided that white was going to get too lost in the layout. So I'm just using my Mementos ink and smushing that on top of the sticker to dye it a little bit black. Now my tip, if you do this, I was really happy with how this looked. It doesn't get a really thick coverage. It does sort of have a, a patchy look, I suppose, to it, but I really liked the look of that. It really matched the layout because the flowers aren't a perfect crisp black and white colour either. But my tip is to let it dry. I was really impatient and wanted to get in there straight away and put it on my page. So I have ended up with black smudges on my page that I have had to cover with Heidi Shine. I was planning to use Heidi Shine anyway, but I had to be really strategic as to where my Heidi Shine went because I have put black smudges on the page. So I do recommend, walking away for 5 minutes. It really wouldn't have taken long to dry, and giving that time to dry. But I love the way it looked, so I definitely will do it again, and I will give it a try with other colours as well. But yeah, just give it time to dry. That is my massive tip. So I put a couple of smudges and I put a fingerprint on my layout, so I need to fix that. So I've just gone to wash my hands because I'm like, disaster. And once I wash my hands, that is when I try and do a little bit of saving. So I just pulled up the T a little bit there because it was on top of a star, and I pulled that star off and have glued it over a smudge. And then I pulled the really big star from over here and put that over the huge fingerprint that I left on the page. So I'm just switching around a couple of the stars to try and cover up the messes that I have made. So it would have been so much easier if I had have just left this dry. Then I wouldn't have had to fiddle around trying to cover up the marks that I made. I just realized there that I've got some smudges on the flower as well. So I've really spread these smudges quite far around my wreath. So Heidi Shine to the rescue. I have just pulled out some really gorgeous pink, the blush color, and I'm just really strategically dabbing that right on top of some of the smudges and then around the wreath as well to really go along with the gorgeous colors that are around the circle. I was always planning to use Heidi Shine, but I don't usually be so careful as to where exactly I'm putting it. I usually just splash it on wherever. Now I'm pulling out the gold Heidi Shine, and again popping that on top of any smudges that I may have made at first, and then flicking it around the rest of the layout. And then I am just about done. And I was really, really thrilled with the way this turned out. These colours are just gorgeous. And it was so easy to work with such beautiful, beautiful colours. I really didn't do much or use much in this layout to get such a really full and beautiful look. I like white space, so I'm really happy with how that is sitting. You can see off to my right there, I pulled out the little girl world phrases that came in one of the old kits, and I'm just having a look at that now to see if I can use it, but none of the words suited the layout, so I leave that be. But I do get a couple of words from the cut apart sheet that I thought went along with the heading sweet moment, and I popped those down as well. They say the greatest, so I just thought that was a really cute little way to finish off this layout and tie it all together. And then I am done. So I've got a few photos for you to see a little bit close up some of the effects there, and you can see especially how well the Mementos ink dyed the letters. Some of them have sort of rubbed a little bit again from my finger marks. If I had have left that dry, that would have worked better. You can see all the different textures and the different levels that the foam and the wood veneer and all of that make. So I hope you've loved this layout, guys. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more.